So Scott, we've spent the best part of 3 decades in the channel that we know and love, and it has always been represented as a vertical structure. A vendor creates technology and ultimately a customer buys it, and inside there you have distributors, you have resellers, you have service providers, and you start getting into a narrative that says, well, I don't want to be a reseller anymore because I do so much more, which is so fundamentally true, because what we're starting to see now with the iasset.com platform going into so many different organizations, we're starting to see that the vertical channel is almost taken for granted or not even discussed. It's an ecosystem. When you have a bunch of influencers influencing a technology deal rather than someone just selling something. What's your view on ecosystems and how they're emerging and how they're starting to dictate what technology gets bought by who, and who are the biggest influencers in that ecosystem?
Well, I think it's fairly common knowledge now that most people do their research online before they even go to a reseller or a service provider. They used to use them as a business advisor or a technology advisor to ask them the best technology to use. But that model often was broken because they talk about just the technology rather than actually what's the business initiative you want to solve. So now they do their own research about what's best practice and who else is using what technologies. And then larger companies will go and get consultants or the big six to come in and make sure that they're making the right decisions so that they've got basically not putting their necks on the line. And then they'll go present that to maybe one or more service providers. You might have a security service provider just looking after security. You might have a network and storage or a cloud provider doing the other bits and pieces. So no longer is it just the linear channel. You've got all these different players involved to actually get the outcome the business requires.
Well, that's a really important point, the outcome that the business requires, because if it's a technology discussion, it's a static discussion. Someone's influencing those outcomes, because what we're seeing with our customers is they will sell technology, but then they don't leave it alone. And that is when the influencer comes in. That's when the ecosystem really starts to shine, because you're not delivering just a business outcome that's expected. It's the non-expected stuff that really starts to add value.
Once you deploy a platform like ours, you move from a passive, we'll wait for the customer to call us because they've done their research. You've already deployed something. You can now go and look at what they've got, and as technology evolves or business practices evolve, you can go back to them and create those unsolicited proposals back to the end customer, rather than just simply sitting there waiting for the customer to say, well, I need a new router or cloud service or whatever it is.
Yeah, it used to be called consultation,
Yeah.
and now it's influencer.
Yeah.
And someone is charging for that, of course, because they're giving the customer a greater outcome than otherwise what would have anticipated
Well, I think
themselves.
if you look at the internet at the moment, it's all about content provision, right? Quality of content, because the content providers expect then people will come to them for the business part. So there is a bit of risk in that sort of approach, but eventually you want to be the lead in whatever space it is you're pushing.
Which really leads well into a significant initiative that iasset.com have been on and we're helping a lot of customers, particularly vendors, the notion of better together, where we're not replacing, we're adding, or we're fulfilling what already exists. So you might have a piece of technology or a system or a channel program, whatever it is.
Yep.
Better Together is part of the ecosystem, which says we're fulfilling on a strategy which otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And Cisco's a great example of that, and many others. Explain Better Together in where it all came from, what made you want to go out there and really push that initiative?
Well, I think if you look at effectively the poor old customer at the end of this chain of technology providers, distributors, service providers, etc., everyone historically has been in it for themselves. That's really what business is all about. But that breaks down when you get to the end customer. If you can align all those players to be beneficial for each other, then you end up with the win-win-win situation, rather than the vendor channel stuffing the distributor because they've got to meet their number, and the distributor doing all sorts of things because they've got to meet their number, and then the service provider throwing in technology that's not appropriate. And there are lots of examples of people that have pushed whatever the latest tech is, but that may not be appropriate for the end customer. It's just that there's better spiffs or whatever. So it's actually about aligning all of those players and the influencers to get a better outcome for the end customer, which is what we're all about, really.